Hello everyone, this is update for February 18, 2024, day 725 of the war, end of the date update. So catch up for February 17 and 16. So first I'm gonna start with one proof that I mentioned before, that there are artillery shells on the market. They available actually. They actually available on a short notice. So there's this article that I found in Czech online media, and you can see the web address. You can go check it and all that. What it really says that Czech Minister of Defense offered for, I guess, Ukrainian president 500,000. That's what it says here. 500,000 Czech language. 500,000 155 millimeter shells, and then also 300,000 of 122 millimeter shells. So 155 is obviously NATO Western standard. 122 is sort of Soviet standard, which is Ukraine is still extensively using, and actually those howitzers D30, they're actually pretty good, surprisingly, for the Soviet sort of design. They actually were developed from Czech, actually, design during World War II, which Czech Republic was working for Germany at that time. But the point is that the shells are available. What instead the Ukrainian president and his political top is doing, they just going and whining everywhere and begging instead of actually solving the problem. Yes, these shells are not free. They are, a market price, whatever they are. But Ukraine has the money. It can purchase it, and it can get it in a week or two. And this could have been done, months ago, 2 months ago, and this would avert alleged crisis with artillery shells in Ukrainian army, which I think is misrepresented problem, and the problem is really totally different, and this sort of artillery shell shortage is just a way to mask actually much worse, much deeper problem in the Ukrainian army, which I mentioned before, is lack of motivation, extremely poor organization, or I would say lack thereof in Ukrainian top military command, and that's really where the problem is. This is, I would say, hopefully this helps to explain why Ukrainian political top is simply will not be able to deal successfully with Russian system, with Russian war machine. Now let's actually switch to the next topic, and that's actually builds on the same idea. This is a new Russian star general, Mordvichev, General Mordvichev. He is in charge of their troops that captured just right now Avdiyivka, as we all know. He was actually personally congratulated with a telegram by Russian president, which is, I would say, extremely high honor. As you can see, he's being interviewed by the top Russian propagandist. This is interview from July 23rd of 2023. The most important part of this interview, which I guess at that time was totally overlooked, nobody kind of knew, this General Mordvichev. So he in that interview, he actually said that this war is going to be fairly long. This was one important point, and that this war will end in Eastern Europe. That's another one. That Ukraine is just intermediary sort of goal, task, and the ultimate goal is Eastern Europe. That's actually what he literally said. And unfortunately, I don't think this interview is available anywhere on the Western media, but hopefully you believe me. So going back to this general, and I think why it's important is because actually he is capable of achieving things. This is first time that a Russian president finally found a tool that can actually successfully use Russian war machine, because he was constantly changing generals since the beginning of the war. Most of them were completely, absolutely incompetent. They were dismissed, and eventually, by trial and error, he found this person who actually is capable, as I stated before. And the reason I'm saying he's capable is because of Avdiyivka, what happened in Avdiyivka, and which is example of successfully using Russian military machine. It's imperfect, it's a Soviet Union and so on. This is all known problems. However, what he managed to do is actually, so for the first time during this sort of modern this war, he concentrated Russian troops on a very narrow area. Actually, let's have a look at this. So he concentrated, as you can see, this 4 brigades here in this very narrow sort of line of the section of the front line, and that allowed to basically penetrate Ukrainian defenses, breach through Ukrainian defenses, and then completely collapse Ukrainian, defenses in Avdiyivka. Prior Russian, it's absolutely common sense, not a rocket science, really primitive thinking. This is what's being done in all prior wars. So that's sort of like the beginner textbook on waging wars. Let's put it this way. That's what I would describe. But this simple idea was somehow totally foreign to all previous Russian commanders. So, and they were not able to do it successfully. He did it successfully. It worked. He managed to collapse Ukrainian defenses. What is even more important, that all of these all of these brigades, all of the units here, they are absolutely mediocre Russian units. There's no outstanding. There's no airborne. There's nothing special. They are not any better. They are really absolutely average motorized or mechanized brigades of the Russian army, which goes back to even sort of more dangerous situation is that that's what majority of the Russian army is. Fairly mediocre, nothing special, and he learned how to use that imperfect tool in effective way. That's really the biggest danger out of all of this, out of this situation. Sort of moving to the next level, all of this. In this sort of capture of Avdiyivka, what happened, 3rd Brigade, which is Ukrainian, this Azov, but there are sort of 2 Azovs, but the one is, this is one of them, is 3rd one, which is really 2 brigades, roughly a division, attempted actually to counterattack these 4 brigades, and lost, was beaten down, and was thrown back. What this also highlights that the time of extreme, Ukrainian side can win using motivation and just superiority in motivation is over. Russian army is becoming much better system, much better organized. It's actually becoming a system, versus Ukrainian army is still remaining a peasants' army at large. This really means disaster for Ukraine, for Ukrainian army, and really need for drastic change and really quick change. Otherwise, we may see Ukrainian army defending Dnipro and Zaporizhya, or Dnipropetrovsk in the old way, in the way it's this may happen sooner than later. If there are no changes on the Ukrainian side, and as I stated before, Russia has capable commander, and he knows how to use pretty poor quality tool, which he has at his disposal. This is extremely dangerous combination. Really forebodes very catastrophic outcome for Ukraine if there are, as I said, if there are no quick, immediate changes on the Ukrainian side, which I doubt, given the Ukrainian political leadership. It simply does not have intellectual power to do anything different. The best they can do is just go around, beg and whine, and that's all they can. And that's a testament of low intellectual capacity of Ukrainian political leadership, and also the same is military leadership. Because you can clearly see here very simple problem that Russian commander is concentrating its troop on a very narrow section of the front line. Ukrainian command does not react, absolutely rigid. The brigades remain in the same position. There's nothing, no really reinforcement until the front line started really collapsing. It was really too late when the 3rd Brigade was brought in. And then they threw that one, and it's, again, instead of actually, as I mentioned before, in doing it a proper counter-offensive, let's say, attacking from Novokalinova in the rear of these brigades, and really, or doing something along those lines, it's being done in the most primitive way is to hold this bottleneck, which is, as I stated, absolutely mistaken and wrong. So again, the assessment of this battle for Avdiyivka is really critical, I think, juncture in this war, where Russian military machine is becoming clearly more stronger, more potent, and more capable to be successful going forward over Ukrainian military, which still remains in this Soviet level, and Russian machine is becoming sort of Soviet plus level, and that's enough to overcome Ukrainian forces. Also, there is this representation that Russian troops outnumbered Ukrainian troops, which is, a result of the action of the Russian commander. But if you look at the whole front line, Ukrainian army is 900,000 people, Russian is 600,000 people. Ukrainian command had all resources and everything they need to bring more troops here, to do counterattack and so on. So all of the tools were available. The same is going true for the artillery shells. Ukrainian command could have scrambled all of the artillery shells from the rest of the front line, which obviously not needed, but I'm exaggerating, and basically bring enough shells to do, to fend off this attack by Russian troops. Again, this means maneuvering with resources, and that's the key in the war, and that's what Ukrainian command at all levels is not capable. With exception, as I stated, there are at the battalion level, at the company level, but those commanders, they don't have enough resources. They really don't have enough, and so this is outcome, as I stated before. This is probably turning point where things gonna go for worse for Ukraine in pretty quick fashion, unless there are drastic changes in Ukrainian military. The other important part, and actually going back to this artillery shells, Russia does not have a lot of artillery shells. They are not, not shooting it well. They actually also, saving them. They have rationing, so it's not that Russian troops actually won by using artillery shells or actually even tanks. It was really effective use of infantry. It's infantry. This is in some ways this is really complete change to how the war used to be, where it was more of the war of artillery and so on and tanks. Now it's actually turned. In this case, and I'm not sure if this continues, but in this case, it turned actually into the war of infantry and Russian organization, not the infantry, not individual soldiers. They are definitely lower quality than average Ukrainian soldiers, no question about it. But organizationally, each Russian brigade and above, they were organizationally much better than Ukrainian counterparts, with probably exception of the 3rd Brigade. But it was too little, too late, and totally in the wrong way how it's applied. So it's not the blame on the 3rd Brigade. It's really how it's being used by Ukrainian command. So again, this was Russian army won this by using infantry, by using better organization. Additional factor here is these gliding bombs, which are very cheap and effective tool against the rigid defense, which is exactly what Ukrainian command is practicing. Otherwise, they're not terribly effective. What makes them actually effective is Ukrainian command, is incompetence of Ukrainian command. That's what makes this gliding bombs effective, and they cheap for Russia. You can see this is old Soviet bomb. They just this gliding component is probably $10,000. I don't know, at most $20,000. Not gonna, I'm just guessing, but it's cheap. The whole thing is fairly cheap. This is 500 kilogram bomb. Probably has actually, 400 plus minus kilograms of explosive. So that's your equivalent of regular Russian missiles that Russia is using to hit Ukraine, right? Ukrainian or Soviet equivalent would be Tochka U, but all of them, all of these daggers, so all of these Russian missiles, they are effectively all 480 kilograms of explosive in the end. How it's delivered is different story. Delivery mechanism, meaning like one is faster, other one is just flying closer to the ground and so on. But in the end, they are all delivering 480 kilograms of explosive to the target. And they cost million plus, maybe 500,000 at minimum, versus this probably cost $20,000. So as you can imagine, this is huge difference in terms of Russia can send a lot of them. And that's what really Russian side was using to compensate for the lack of artillery shells. And it worked effectively because of the rigidity of Ukrainian defenses. So this is sort of, in a way, that's why I'm saying is this battle for Avdiyivka in some ways potentially turning point in the war, unfortunately for the worse for Ukraine. Because, as I stated, it's a combination of factors. Russia has capable commander who can concentrate troops. He learned to use mediocre troops. The Russian side learned how to overcome shortage of artillery shells by replacing them with this gliding bombs, and then Ukrainian command remains incompetent and rigid, which enables use of this gliding bomb. So it's all, positives for Russian side, negatives for Ukrainian side, and that's why I'm saying that this is extremely negative development for Ukrainian side, and it forebodes catastrophe, much larger scale catastrophes, a series of catastrophes, unless Ukrainian side changes, and maybe those catastrophes will be needed for Ukrainian side to change. We'll see how it goes. The other thing I want to mention, that Ukrainian army was retreating in such a disarray that they were not even able to hold on to this coking plant, so it was lost. And it's actually excellent defensive position. The whole Avdiyivka is actually great defensive position. So it was really, from that perspective, it was big loss, and there are no sort of new defensive lines on the same level that what was in Avdiyivka. So it would be much easier for Russian troops to kind of move forward and roll forward. There are also already reports that they initiated fighting for Lastachkina, so most likely this is what, this line of defense is not going to hold. And really maybe where Ukrainian troops managed to finally stop Russian troops is going to be this line Berdichi, Orlivka, Toninke. So we'll see how things develop. But so far this is probably it's a huge setback, but it has huge potential for a catastrophe for Ukraine. That's probably very poorly understood at this moment. So now I'm going to do a walk through the front line, as I always do, in a clockwise fashion, starting from very north. So the situation along the state border remains more or less the same. No essential differences there. Now let's jump to North Luhansk front line. Things here are fairly quiet, which goes back to what I stated before, is that Russian command does not have excess resources in terms of both troops, artillery shells, and everything. Even tanks. There is not excessive resources, so they cannot afford to do major attacks on two or even three sections of the front line. So this was fairly quiet, except for attacks here near Terny, but where actually Russian troops advanced, like 500 meters or so. So there are some advances here as well by Russian side. Now let's move to the north Donbass front line. Things here fairly quiet. Nothing special going on here. Now let's jump to the southern sector. Here things also very similar, relatively scaled down Russian attacks in all of the same places. Russian troops obviously continuing their slowly snail-pales advance, specifically here between Khromovo and Ivanivske. They actually managed to get to outskirts of Ivanivske, so they basically starting fighting for this village. Now let's move to the central Donbass. I already explained this was actually withdrawal that I showed in a previous video. I actually want to provide update on this, what happened here. So this actually was, it's actually very disgusting case. I usually don't discuss those things, but what happened here is that Ukrainian command, this was 110th Brigade, literally left behind wounded soldiers, like 5 or 6 of them, of those wounded soldiers, just literally abandoned them, left them sort of dying there when they were retreating, which is total disgrace for those commanders in 110th Brigade. And then, there was sort of one disgrace, and then it was even worse. Then Russian troops that sort of captured those soldiers, they executed them which is basically doing war crimes, which is actually, unfortunately, is endemic in Russian army. This is more of a norm. This is not exception for the Russian army. There was another example where Russian soldiers executed two Ukrainian soldiers that were surrendering to them. That was actually on the North Donbass section of the front line. This actually happened also a day or two ago. So, and there are tons of those examples in the past, as you probably remember if you watched. But this is a norm in the Russian army, how they fight the war, which goes back to its roots in the Soviet army, because that's how Soviet army was fighting World War II, and so those sort of genes, they carry on. So this is the situation, it's generally where it is. This is more sort of straight in the front line now. Russian troops continuing their attacks around the Smarinka salient, Novomikhailivka. There were no meaningful advances since the prior video, but all it means is that once this is done, either Russian command will continue moving forward here, or they will shift their resources, available resources, to this sort of more southern sector. We'll see what happens soon. Now let's move to the Zaporizhya front line. Things here were relatively quiet, with the exception of Robotyne. There was a very strong artillery barrage by Russian troops, which led to actually loss of some of the positions of Ukrainian troops, and Russian troops start engaging into fighting for Robotyne. So basically, they trying to capture it back. We'll see what happens there, but again, this goes back to this whole situation that Ukrainian army is, the motivation is seriously down overall, and that reflects in its ability to stand the ground. Now let's move to the situation along the Dnipro River. Things here remain more or less the same. Ukrainian command maintains this bridgehead in Krinky. Russian troops attempting to destroy it, but not successful. So basically, the status quo remains here. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye-bye.